Hello, everybody. I hope y'all are having a good week. This is Miss De La Garza. I am going to go over the work for week 6. I know Coach Hendrick had a Zoom yesterday. This one's going to require y'all to draw. If you want graph paper, you can Google graph paper and a million things will pop up, and you can print some of that if you have a printer at home. But if not, I've just drawn it on my on my spiral that I have at home, just on regular notebook paper, and just did it there. So just know that you may have to do a little drawing. Let's look at let's look over the week 6 problems first. If you notice, it says question number 1 has 2 parts. That's going to go for all the questions on week 6. There's going to be 2 parts. It's going to want you to pick what the domain is and what the range is. And if you go scroll through, you're constantly being asked, what's the domain and what's the range? Question 4, same thing. Select the values for the domain and range of the function below. So you would check the domain and then the range, whatever it might be. Same thing for number 5. Okay, so 2 answer choices for each problem, just to clarify that. All right, so number 1, identify the domain and range of the function graph below. So, no, don't want that. This is just to help me. Okay, I was gonna see if I could write on it, but it won't let me while I'm in live mode. Bummer. Anyway, okay. So it wants you to identify the domain and range of the function graphed below. So I'm gonna go back. Let me share my screen and get to my whiteboard. And I'm gonna just start drawing. I have these little arrows, and these do not have to be perfect, but this is just to give you a reminder of how we're doing these. Okay, so we're on number 1. And it's saying, what is the domain and the range? And it gives you a picture like this. And again, I am going to be, this is going to be just like what your work is like, but I'm going to be using different numbers. Okay, so this goes through the point, and I'm going to say that this point is 5. Okay, before we go any further, let's label our graph. Remember that this is our x-axis going across or horizontally, and then going up and down or vertically is our y-axis. Let's go over domain and range. Domain is whatever your x values are. Range is your y values. So it just wants to know, how many numbers does x represent? How many numbers does y represent? The way that if you forget domain and range a lot, I have 2 ways that you can remember domain and range. The first way that some people like to remember is that D comes before R in the alphabet. Well, so does X and Y. X comes before Y in the alphabet. So that's one way you can remember. D comes before R, X comes before Y. So domain is our X value and range is our Y value. The other way you can remember it is Dr. X, Y. Kind of the same thing. It's just whatever you need to do to kind of remember whatever's X and whatever's Y. So domain is X, range is Y. All right, I'll kind of keep reminding y'all throughout this presentation. So let's start with our domain. So we're gonna work on the domain right now. Our domain, is right here. That's our X value, it runs across. So our domain is X, so we're talking about, okay, where do my numbers go? And when we do this, what I like to do is crop. So I'm going to take my arrows, and we'll talk about what the arrows mean in here in just a second. And, well, we can crop it down, but before I go even further, let's talk about those arrows. When you see these arrows, that means, oh, that was ugly. When you see the arrows, that means that it's going to go on forever. So any kind of arrow like this, that means it's going to go on forever. And the way we say that is all real numbers. Because what happens is this thing is going to just keep going and keep going. It's going to go off your page, off the graph that you see on your answers or on your assignment. And that graph is going to keep spreading this way and this way. It may be very little, but that's what these arrows right here are telling you, that it's infinite, that it's going to go on forever. So if I crop them down to my x-axis, they touch those arrows, and they make little arrows when you do that. So that means that it's going to go on forever on my x-axis. Okay? So now, so that's what you're going to be whenever you see those two arrows. You don't have a starting point and a stopping point. It starts here, but it's going to go on forever, and it looks like it stops here, but it's actually going to go on forever. So we're just going to say all real numbers. So that's a good clue for that first question. Okay, let's go to the domain. And I'm probably going to have to redo this because it got a little messy on me. All right. So once again, I had my graph, and our domain is going on forever, our x-axis. Now we're going to talk about our y, which is this. It goes up and down. We said that the stopping point was right here at 5. So this is where we need to crop. So we're doing range. And when I mean cropping, it's kind of like when you're cropping a picture. Whenever you have a picture of your family, but you don't want all the other stuff on the sides or on the top or the bottom, you just want to kind of crop it. You want to get rid of that excess. So I'm basically trying to figure out, okay, where does my graph start? It starts right here where that 5, where it went through the 5. My graph is not as good as what is on your assignment, but it means that your graph stopped at that 5. But if you try to crop it up here at these arrows, what did we just talk about with those arrows? That it's going to go on forever. So what we're going to say is that y, because we're talking about the range, is either greater than or less than 5, because that's where it stopped at 5. We actually had that stopping point there at 5. Well, look at your graph. These arrows are pointing up, and on your y-axis, this is 6, 7, 8, 9, and it just keeps getting higher when you're going that direction. So it's basically like you're saying, my answer, y, can be any number along the x-axis as long as it is greater than or equal to 5. And it is equal to 5 because it actually stopped at 5. So it's going to be y is greater than or equal to 5. You don't have a stopping point, or you could think of it as you had a starting point at 5, but then those arrows right here said, okay, we're going to go on forever. Okay, so that should be a good hint. I'm trying to make this as close to the assignment as possible. Remember, all I did was just change numbers. Okay, so then let's talk about number 2, because that's a different looking graph. Let's actually go to number 2. So again, my graph is not going to be as pretty as these, but it's very close. I just use different numbers. Okay, now we have number 2. Again, they're looking for the domain and the range. So let's go back. And I'm going to try to draw this as best I can. Okay, so then I'm going to say that my last point on this graph was -9. And I'm going to say, I don't know, one of my points is -7. And I'm doing this for a reason. I should have probably done this first. Your line looks a lot like this, where you have a dot, and then the line goes up, and then down, and then up again, and then it stops. And I'm going to say this point is -5. Remember, this is just like what we're doing in the practice or the assignment. I have just taken different numbers. Remember that when you go down on your x-axis from here, why does it do that? Dang it. From here down, these are all negative numbers. It goes to 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. From here it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, positive numbers. And I am totally goofing on this. It should be positive over here. When we go this way on the x-axis, these are positive numbers. So we start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When we start here and go this way, they get negative. -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so just a reminder on how the graphs work. And again, using the same numbers or using different numbers for the same kind of problem. All right. So this one has these dots here. I'm going to make this one like gigantic. These dots mean there is a start and a stop. And when we do the cropping for these, we want to do least to greatest. So let's start with our domain. Remember that domain is our x. So I'm going to look at this axis and we're going to crop just like I was talking about. When we start at this dot right here, crop it up to the x-axis. Dang, I didn't do a very good job of that. Let me try that again. So we started at the least value, -9, and then we stopped right here. We went dot to dot. Okay, that's the lowest point on my graph right here. This is the highest point on my graph right here. So dot to dot, or I guess you should say I went this far over this way and this far over this way. Let me do this. Well, it's not letting me draw the arrow. Okay. So we crop. So my domain, remember when we set these up, and I know this is a review for you guys, we said we're doing domain, so it's X. We do have a starting point and a stopping point. So I know I'm going to need a number here, and I'm going to need a number here. Well, I started at -9 over here. So -9. And I stopped at -7 or +7, so that goes. So that's least to greatest. Remember that solid dots mean that it gets that equal to. So this is greater than or equal to. If it had an open dot like that, then you would just leave it alone and it'd just be greater than or equal to. My little stylus does not want to cooperate. Try writing it over here. If those were not solid dots and they were open dots, you would just leave them as greater than, less than, and greater than. But when they're closed dots, they get the equal to sign. So that is how you would answer that problem for domain. We started at -9, we went to -7, I cropped. Remember, that's my x-axis. So that's why I'm cropping down to here and to here. All right, now let's do our range. Remember, range is y. So now we're going to crop to our y-axis. So we're going to do y. And we're going to set it up because remember, when they have the dots where they start and they stop, that's when we set it up like I've done right here. We already know that they're solid dots, so they're going to get the equal to symbol. All right, so remember, we're going least to greatest. So I'm going to crop to my lowest point, and then I'm going to crop to my highest point, which was at -8, or +8, excuse me. I don't know why I'm loving those negatives today. So -5 and +8, least to greatest. So if you crop your picture, and you probably have highlighters and all kinds of stuff. I wish this thing did. I can't figure out why it doesn't, but whatever. You'll probably do a better job. If you can print graph paper out or draw it on your own, or print out the assignment, you'd probably be doing a better job of cropping it on your own. But you get the gist of it. Again, I am doing the same kind of problem that you have. I'm just using different numbers. All right, on to number 3. Try to get this as clean as I can. Okay, all right, number 3. So we have kind of like a dot out here, and then it kind of goes like that. So let's start with our domain. Now, this time we have a dot and we have this arrow. So that means that there is a stopping point or starting point, however you want to look at it. But then we're going to go on into infinity somewhere. So if it helps, just crop it. So we're doing domain, which is x. This is our x-axis. So we're cropping to this line. So I'm going to crop. And I didn't put a number because that arrow means it's infinite. So what I have to do is kind of stop what I'm doing and go over, and I'm gonna put a pretend number. I'm gonna put that this dot, when I crop it, is it at +8. So I know I have x for my domain and I have a number 8. Now what we need to determine, is it going to get the less than sign or the greater than sign? Is x getting less than 8 or is it getting greater than 8 when we're going this way? It's shooting to the left. Remember that on this side of the x-axis, that's positive numbers. But if we're going this, if we're going this way, those are going to be negative numbers. So when we have our point and you're going this way along your x-axis, 8 is getting less, or x is getting less than or equal to 8. Remember, alligator eats the bigger number, so x is less than or equal to 8. All right, so that's domains. Remember, same kind of question, different numbers. Okay, so range, y. So on my range, I'm going to pretend that this is like 3. Remember, we go least to greatest, and that means we go bottom to top on range because we're looking at this y-axis. So I'm going to crop to my y-axis, which is at that -3. So now I'm going to have a y and a 3. I don't know why I keep saying negative. It's +3. Now what you have to think of is this dot here and this arrow. That arrow is above the 3. When we are going this direction on the x-axis, they're getting bigger. So like this is 4, this is 5, this is 6. So on your range, it was at 3, but then it's going to continue going up because remember that arrow tells you it's going to just keep getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and it's going to go on to infinity. So this is going to be higher and higher. You can crop and see that it's getting higher than 3. So y is greater than or equal to 3. The reason why it's equal to is because of that dot. It can be equal, that solid dot. It can be equal to 3 or greater. So y is greater than or equal to 3. Same problem, different numbers. All right, now I'm going to go over, this is like for number 4 and number 5. They're the same kind of problem. Whenever you have a graph like we did 1 through 3, that's when you use the greater than or less than symbols. Or you say all real numbers if you have the double arrows like we saw. Okay? But when you get either points or a set of points, that is when you're just going to list numbers. So let me go over that real quick. I believe for number 4, they just give you a list of numbers. So they give you something like 2, -2, 3, 4, and I ran out of room. I'm going to put this other one down here. -3, -2. This is just a set of points. If I were to graph them on a graph, they're just dots, sets of points. So when they ask for the domain and the range, the first thing you're going to do is label your points. This is the first number. Remember, X comes before Y in the alphabet. When you're listing these numbers, it's the same thing. I have a set of points. I have X value and Y value. X value, Y value. X value, Y value. X value, Y value. If you label your points, that's half the battle. Because now all you do is when you have points, you just list your numbers. So remember the fancy brackets? That's what we were doing, just listing your points. So let's do domain, which is X value. So we're always going to go least to greatest. So I have a 2, a 3, a -8, and a -3. So I'm going to start at -8 because that's my least value. then -3. Then, and if you need to, you can cross them out as you're doing. Then I have 2 and 3. So you know you've used up your numbers. If you need to cross them out, do that. Then I'm going to do my range. Fancy brackets. All right, so if you notice on the range, we have this -2 here and this -2 here. Well, when you have them repeat, you just list them one time. So you'd have -2, 4, and then 5. You don't need to repeat it. And then you're done. Remember that range is y. And so we just did our y values, and that's all you're doing. You're just listing your numbers, least to greatest. This was number 4. On number 5, they actually give you a graph with the points on them. When you have that, you need to label those points. So let me go over a quick little session on remember how to label your points or plot your points. Get rid of some of this. So if you have a graph, all right. So let's say they put a dot right here. Remember that when we plot points, X comes before Y. This is my X-axis over here. Remember that, oops. See, I'm loving those negatives today. I just don't get it. So sorry, guys. Remember that the middle is always 0. All right, so on my x-axis, I went over 1, 2, so -2. And then I went up 1, 2, +2. So this point right here is -2, +2. I don't know why I wrote it down here. We went over to -2, and then we jumped on our y-axis to +2. Let's say they put a point over here. Remember down here, these are negatives as well. So remember, you got to do X and then Y. So start here, I go over 1, 2, 3. So this point is 3, and then down 1, 2, -2. That's that point. So what you need to do when you have your graph on number 5 is label those points, or on a separate sheet of paper, just label them. And then you would do just like we did. Let me do one more point. That way I have 3 and it kind of looks a little bit better. Put one like right here. So we go over to 2, and we go up to 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be that point. So if you list them, you'd have this other one too. So once you list your points, after you've looked at them, just label your X and your Y. And again, it's just asking you to list those numbers, your X values with the fancy brackets, least to greatest are -2, 2, and 3. Your Y values are -2, 2, and 4. And then you're done, and that's it. If you need to, there's lots of YouTube videos on how to plot your points. This is one of the bigger struggles I'm still seeing a lot of freshmen entering in with from middle school. I used to teach middle school. I know you start with this in 6th grade, But I know sometimes when you're looking at that graph, you know, the lines kind of cross. So there's lots of practice online if you need it. If you need to print it out, whatever you need to do to try to help you get those points. Sometimes highlighting them helps, but that's how you would plot those points. Again, if you need help, please let me know. You can send me an email. You can text me. You can leave me a Google Voice comment, whatever is easier. And real quick, I'm not going to put my Google Voice number because this is going on YouTube and I don't want anybody creepy trying to call my Google Voice number. But I will give you my email and you're welcome to just email me. Or your mom or dad or whoever. So this should be ADELAG, the number 1, at NEISD.net. All right, I hope everybody's doing well and I'll talk to you soon.